Don't touch that sign. Henry's voice cracked through the morning stillness like a branch snapping in frost. The two city workers froze mid-step, their hammers raised near the rusted cemetery gate. The older one, a heavy-set man with paint-splattered gloves, turned with a polite, puzzled smile. "Sir, just posting a notice." "Town order." Henry stepped closer, his breath unsteady. "Not here." His hand trembled as it hovered over the red paper nailed to the post. Redevelopment notice. Future site of Evergreen Estates. His heart pounded. The word, redevelopment, felt like a curse whispered over her grave. The younger worker sighed, gesturing helplessly. "Talk to City Hall, old man. We just follow orders." Henry didn't reply. He tore the notice down, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his coat pocket. The men exchanged a look, muttered something about crazy gardeners, and drove off. Dust from their truck swirled through the air, catching on the roses that lined the entrance. He turned slowly toward the graveyard, his graveyard. The morning light touched each headstone like memory revisiting pain. Rows of marble names, forgotten by everyone but him. And in the center, beneath the largest oak, her grave. Margaret Lyle, 1945 to 2009. Beloved wife, forever blooming. His knees stiffened as he knelt beside it. The roses he planted last week had already opened, their petals deep crimson against the gray soil. "They want to move you again," he whispered, brushing away a fallen leaf. "Even now, they can't let you rest." His hands shook as he pressed a folded notice beside the gravestone. The paper caught the wind, rustling like an answer. He closed his eyes, but her voice came unbidden, faint, warm, from years ago. "Henry, don't fight the world. Just plant something beautiful in it." He had tried. God, he had tried. By afternoon, word had spread across the small coastal town. The old cemetery would be clear for luxury homes. The news scrolled across local TV screens, and Henry stood behind his workbench, staring at the flickering images. Smiling faces, ribbon cuttings, the mayor shaking hands with a man in a navy suit. The caption read, "Elliot Vance, CEO of Vance Construction." Henry's world went still. The name was a whisper from another life. He remembered the trial, the official statements, the lies, structural failure, no negligence. The day the construction site collapsed, Margaret had been there delivering lunch to a friend. 37 workers dead. The company paid fines, changed names, kept building. Vance had walked away untouched. Henry gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. "You're still alive," he murmured, still smiling. A soft knock at the door broke his trance. It was Elsie, the young journalist in the Harbor Sentinel, holding a camera and a folder under her arm. "Mr. Lyle? Sorry to drop by unannounced. I heard you're the caretaker here. I'm doing a piece on the redevelopment." Henry's voice steadied. "Then you've come to the right graveyard." She followed him outside as the sky dimmed. The air smelled of rain and cut grass. "How long have you been tending this place?" she asked. "Since the day they buried her," he said, simply. Elsie hesitated. "Your wife." He nodded. She crouched beside the roses, admiring them. "Beautiful. Do you plant them all yourself?" "Every one. I know their roots by heart." He glanced toward the locked shed by the fence. "Some roots go deeper than others." Her eyes flicked toward the shed, curiosity sparking. "I'd love to do a story on this place before they tear it down." Henry gave a faint smile. "Then you'd better hurry. They're moving fast." She took a few photos, thanked him, and left her card on his workbench. When she was gone, he stood alone in the darkening yard. The card's ink shimmered under the lamplight. Elsie Moore, investigative journalist. That night, sleep refused him. He sat by the window, watching the cemetery through the rain. Water pooled at the base of the oak, where Margaret's roses glowed faintly red. He remembered the night she died, the phone call, the sirens, the hospital hallway. The police officers rehearsed sympathy. Faulty foundation. No one to blame. But there had been someone. And now, he had a name again. He rose from the chair, knees aching, and opened the old wooden chest beneath his bed. Inside lay relics of another life. her gardening gloves, a faded photograph, and a folded map of the old construction site. Beneath it, a small, rusted flash drive. He stared at it for a long time before sliding it into the laptop he rarely used. The screen flickered to life. Files appeared. Inspection reports, safety logs, witness statements. He collected them years ago when no one listened. Evidence buried as deep as the dead beneath his roses. He opened one labeled Vance Confession, audio. Static filled the room. Then a voice, smooth, careless, recorded in secret during a council meeting. "We covered that site, Rick. Paid off the inspectors. Nobody's digging up again." Henry exhaled slowly. 30 years of silence broke like a dam. The next morning, he went to the shed. Inside, his tools hung neatly on the walls, shovels, pruning shears, watering cans. But behind a false panel, he revealed something else, an old lockbox containing drives, documents, and photographs. He began sorting them on the table, hands trembling yet sure. The gardener's patience had returned. As he worked, he noticed the demolition crew unloading equipment near the gate. The same red sign now hung from every post. One of the workers spotted him and shouted, "You'll need to clear your things soon, old man." Henry didn't answer. He just looked at them, really looked, until the man's smirk faltered. Then he turned back to his work, muttering under his breath, "You'll dig, but not what you think you're digging." By noon, he'd mapped every grave, marking those untouched since the accident. He circled one area in red, the patch where the soil never settled, where her roses grew tallest. He smiled faintly. "Still watching over me, aren't you, love?" The wind picked up, rattling the leaves. He tucked the old flash drive into his coat and stepped outside, heading toward the town offices. His cane tapped against a stone path in rhythmic defiance. As he reached the gate, he paused. The red signs flapped wildly, but one nail had loosened, causing the notice to curl inward. Beneath it, the faint outline of an older plaque peeked through, in memory of the Lost Builders, 2009. His heart clenched. The names carved, they were the ones he had once fought for. Forgotten now, buried twice, once under stone and once under silence. He pressed his palm against the plaque and whispered, "Time to wake them." When he turned toward the horizon, the construction office lights flickered like sparks against the dusk. Somewhere behind those windows sat Elliot Vance, the man who built his fortune over bones. Henry's eyes hardened. The gardener of graves had found his soil again, and this time what he planted would not grow flowers. The crowd cheered as the mayor cut the ribbon. Golden confetti fluttered through the air, catching sunlight like falling gilt. Henry watched from the back of the gathering, a silent figure among the noise. Behind the podium stood Elliot Vance, confident, smiling, wearing the same expensive arrogance he'd worn 30 years ago when he swore his company was innocent. Cameras flashed. The crowd clapped. Henry's jaw clenched until he tasted blood. Progress. Vance declared into the microphone, "A new chapter for our town, where the past meets opportunity." Henry's fingers curled around the handle of his cane. The past wasn't meeting opportunity. It was being buried again. That night, long after the speeches ended, he walked back through the graveyard alone. The streetlights flickered against his shadow, stretching it across the iron gate. The soil felt heavier under his shoes, as though it knew what was coming. He stopped by Margaret's grave and placed his hand on the wet earth. "They celebrated today," he whispered, "on your bones." The next morning, he opened his shed. Dust hung in the sunlight like time refusing to settle. He rolled up his sleeves, exposing arms lined with veins and scars. The tools gleamed under the lamp, shovels, pruning shears, a rusted trowel, and beside them, a box of labeled envelopes, each marked with a date, a place, a name. He opened one. Inside lay photos of the collapsed site, faces of men long gone, and a single signature, Elliot Vance, Chief Engineer. Henry placed the papers on the bench and began copying them by hand. Each stroke was steady, deliberate. When he finished, he sealed the copies in waterproof bags. Then he dug behind the rose bushes and buried them deep, marking the spot with a small stone. Evidence disguised as devotion. He did it again the next night, and the next. Each time, he planted a piece of truth, Inspection logs, payment slips, voice transcripts, all beneath the roses she loved. One evening, as he wiped sweat from his forehead, a voice startled him. "You're out late, Mr. Lyle." It was Elsie, standing at the gate, camera hanging from her neck. "Mind if I ask what you're planting?" He forced a faint smile. "Just roses, dear. They bloom best when fed the right things." She tilted her head. "You know they're starting demolition next week? I could help you petition." He cut her off gently. "Petitions don't stop bulldozers. Truth does." Her brow furrowed. "Truth." He hesitated, then handed her one of the copied photos. "Keep that safe. If anything happens to me, show it to the world." She looked down at the image, bodies under rubble, a company logo visible on a torn helmet. When she looked up, Henry was already walking back toward the shed. His silhouette moved like a ghost among the gravestones. The next day, the town's newspaper headline read, "Mayor's Vision. Evergreen Estates to begin construction." Henry cut out and pinned it beside Margaret's photo. He stared at it for a long time, whispering, "They'll dig their own graves soon enough." He spent the following days moving through routine, watering flowers, trimming hedges, greeting visitors with quiet politeness. But beneath that calm rhythm, something darker grew. He watched the workers measure land and mark graves with orange flags. He memorized their schedules, their machinery routes, even the location of security cameras. Every detail mattered. That evening, he entered Vance's construction office under the cover of night. The guard, an old friend from church, nodded him through without question. Henry's footsteps echoed down the marble hallway until he reached the boardroom. The smell of polish and deceit hung thick in the air. He opened his satchel and placed a rose on the center table. Its stem dripped faint red from the cut. Then he took out a small USB and inserted it into the presentation computer. The screen came alive with archived inspection reports, falsified signatures, altered dates, forged permits. He smiled faintly. "Let's see how you like planting lies in your own soil." Before leaving, he slipped a printed photo under Vance's chair, the same one he'd given Elsie. When the executive arrived in the morning, the image would be the first thing he saw. The next afternoon, Henry watched from his shed window as two black cars pulled up. Vance stepped out, fury in his stride, followed by the mayor and a lawyer. They spoke in hushed, agitated tones. Henry couldn't hear them, but he could read their faces: panic, denial, fear of exposure. It was working. That night, Elsie returned, breathless. "Mr. Lyle, I think you're onto something. I showed your photo to my editor. He wants more proof. Do you have it?" He nodded slowly. "More than enough. But it's not ready yet." She frowned. "You're playing with fire." He smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe it'll finally burn the right people." Over the next few days, rumors spread through town. Anonymous emails leaked documents to local reporters. City Hall panicked. The groundbreaking ceremony was postponed, pending safety reviews. Vance appeared on TV, insisting everything was legitimate, but his eyes betrayed him, darting, cornered. Henry watched the broadcast from his small living room. Margaret's photo sat beside the screen. "You see him," he whispered. "He's sweating again." That night, a car stopped outside his house. The headlights stayed on. Then a knock echoed through the dark. Henry opened the door slowly. Vance stood there, face tight with rage. "You think this is justice," he hissed. "You're destroying people's livelihoods." Henry's voice was calm. "You destroyed lives long before I started. Vance stepped closer. "Drop this. Oh, man. I can still make it worth your while." Henry studied him. The expensive coat, the trembling hands, the faint stench of fear hidden beneath cologne. Money can't buy back the dead. Vance's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe I'll buy your silence." Henry's lips twitched into something between a smile and a wound. "You already did 30 years ago. I just stopped spending it." Vance's jaw locked. He turned and stormed back to his car. Tires screeched as he sped away. Henry closed the door and leaned against it, his chest heaving. He reached for Margaret's photograph, tracing her smile with trembling fingers. "He came, love," he whispered, "and he's scared." The following morning, police cars surrounded City Hall. A reporter shouted about an ongoing corruption probe. Henry stood at the cemetery gate, watching chaos unfold from afar. But he didn't smile. Revenge, he knew, was not victory. It was excavation, digging until you hit the bones of truth. That night, he returned to his roses. He knelt, brushing away soil until his hand touched one of the buried envelopes. He dug it up and held it against his chest. The moonlight gleamed on the plastic. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "tomorrow they'll see what you saw." He pressed the evidence back into the ground, covering it gently, like planting the final seed. As he stood, the wind rustled through the cemetery, carrying the faint scent of roses across the graves. Henry looked toward the distant glow of the construction site and whispered, "Let them build. I'll decide what grows." The earth beneath his feet felt alive again, as if every buried truth was listening, waiting to bloom. "Step back, Mr. Vance." Henry's voice cut through the air like a blade, low but shaking with a force years in the making. The crowd turned, startled. Cameras froze. On the half-built platform of the cemetery's gate, Elliot Vance stood holding a silver shovel, smiling for the press. His grin faltered when he saw the old man pushing to the crowd, covered in soil, eyes burning with something that wasn't just anger. It was memory, alive again. Henry kept walking, his cane sinking into the soft ground with every step. "You think you can bury the dead twice?" he asked, his voice trembling but sharp enough to slice through the air. Security moved in, but Vance raised a hand, smirking. "It's fine. He's just a local caretaker. Probably confused." Henry stopped a few feet away, breathing heavily. "Confused?" he whispered. "No, son, I've never seen things clearer." He held up a small flash drive, dangling it between two dirt-stained fingers. "Do you know what this is?" Vance's eyes flickered, just for a second, but Henry caught it. The journalist, Elsie, who stood near the stage with her camera, caught it too. The mayor tried to laugh it off. "Sir, please, this is not the time." Henry raised his voice. "It's the only time. 37 men and 1 woman died because this man thought cutting corners was cheaper than safety. My wife among them. He called it a tragic accident. But I found the recordings. I found the lies. And I planted them right here, under your shining new foundation." A ripple went through the crowd. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Vance's jaw tightened. "You're insane," he said quietly, stepping closer. Henry smiled faintly. "Maybe, but the truth isn't." Suddenly, the ground beneath the stage gave a soft groan, with creaking, soil shifting. One of the construction men shouted as a support beam tilted slightly. Henry didn't move. He simply looked up at Vance. "You built this whole thing on rotten earth, just like before." Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. Elsie lifted her mic, voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Mr. Vance, care to comment on allegations?" Vance glared at her. "This is a setup. But his words drowned under mechanical sound, a faint beeping from beneath the platform. Henry's eyes stayed fixed on him. "That sound you hear? It's not a bomb. It's a timer. Each one marks the spot where I buried evidence. Inspection reports, payment ledgers, even that tape of your voice admitting the cover-up. And at noon today, every news outlet in this state will receive the files. Automatically." Vance's face drained of color. You can't." Henry stepped closer. "I can. I already did." Gasps broke from the audience as construction workers backed away, some shouting orders. Elsie kept filming. The mayor tried to cut the feed, but phones were already streaming live. The entire town was watching. Henry turned toward the graves. "You can pave over the dead," he said softly, "but you can't silence them." A sudden gust of wind swept through, scattering rose petals across the site, red against gray concrete, like drops of memory, refusing to fade. Vance lunged forward, grabbing Henry by the collar. "You'll ruin me." Henry's voice came out like a whisper, calm and final. "That's the point." Guards pulled Vance back. Reporters surrounded him, questions firing like bullets. Is it true you falsified safety reports? Did you bribe inspectors? What happened to the victim's compensation fund? Henry stepped away, ignoring the chaos. He walked slowly toward Margaret's grave. Every step echoed like closure. He knelt beside the roses, still blooming despite the dust. "You can rest now," he murmured. Behind him, Vance's voice rose, desperate, cracking. "This old man's lying. None of it's real." But then a projector flickered to life on the big screen behind the stage. Elsie had connected her camera feed. The audio clip played for all to hear, Vance's voice from decades ago. "We covered that site, Rick. Paid off the inspectors. Nobody's digging up again." The crowd went silent. Even the wind stopped. Henry closed his eyes. For the first time in years, his heartbeat slowed. Vance stumbled forward, shouting, "That was doctored. He's framing me." But no one listened. The police moved in, quiet and certain. Flashbulbs burst. His own lawyer turned away. Henry watched as they placed handcuffs on the man who had stolen his peace. Vance's eyes found him one last time. "You destroyed my life." Henry's reply was barely a whisper. "I'm just giving it back what it owed." As they led Vance away, Elsie approached, lowering her camera. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Henry nodded slowly. It was never about revenge. It was about truth finally getting air. She hesitated. "You risked everything. If they find out you trespass, planted." He cut her off with a tired smile. "I've been living on borrowed time since she died. Might as well spend it buying hers back." Elsie's eyes softened. "The world will know what you did. I'll make sure of it." Henry looked toward the graves, the roses glowing crimson under the fading sun. "Good. Just tell them it wasn't hate that buried him. It was love for someone who deserved better." The ceremony ended in chaos, sirens, reporters, flashing lights. But Henry didn't stay to watch. He walked back to the rows of stones, his cane tapping in rhythm with his breathing. Behind him, police cars carried Vance away. Ahead, the horizon turned gold, bleeding into night. At the gate, he paused and looked back once more. The stage had collapsed partially where the soil was softest. Beneath it, faint glimmers of plastic sheeting peeked from the dirt, the buried evidence now part of the land itself. He smiled faintly. "You can't destroy what's already rooted." Elsie caught up with him near the road. "Mr. Lyle, where will you go now?" He thought for a long moment, then nodded toward the sea. "Somewhere quiet. Maybe start a garden that doesn't hide ghosts." She smiled sadly. "You're not like most men I meet." Henry chuckled under his breath. "That's because most men don't know how long revenge takes to bloom." They parted ways at the crossroad. Youth carrying truth forward, age walking into peace. The night air felt lighter. When Henry reached his home, he placed his cane beside the door and sat down by the window. From there, he could see the distant glow of the cemetery. For the first time, the roses didn't look red from grief. They looked alive. He whispered into silence, "You were right, Margaret. You plant something beautiful, and the world eventually sees it." The wind answered with a soft sigh, carrying the scent of roses through the cracked window. Henry leaned back, eyes closing as sirens faded into the distance. Outside, the graveyard stood untouched for the first time in decades. The land, once marked for destruction, had become sacred again, and somewhere beneath that soil, the truth slept peacefully, not buried, just finally home. "Don't cut them." Henry's voice trembled through the misty dawn as a young worker lifted his shears toward the graveyard's roses. The man hesitated, startled by the firmness in the old caretaker's tone. "Sir," they said to clear everything. Orders came straight from the mayor. Henry took a slow step forward, his eyes cold but calm. "Those roses belong to the dead. You clear them, you clear the truth." The worker looked confused, then uneasy. I don't make the rules." Henry gave a faint, weary smile. "Neither did they, but they paid for them." The man backed away, muttering something, and left the garden untouched. Henry watched him go, then turned to the roses. Their crimson petals shimmered with dew, like small drops of blood glistening in morning light. Beneath those roots lay the memories he had planted, the confessions, the evidence, the last remnants of a story no one could silence anymore. News vans lined the cemetery's gate that morning. Cameras faced the ground where Elliot Vance once stood, now a condemned man awaiting trial. Every channel in town played the same footage. The audio, the admission, the shock. We covered that site, Rick. Paid off the inspectors. Nobody's digging it up again. They had dug it up now. Elsie's voice came softly from behind. They're calling you a hero, Miss Lyle. He didn't turn. Heroes save lives. I just made sure the dead could speak again. She stepped closer, holding a small envelope. It's from the district court. They're reopening the case. Families of the victims will finally receive compensation. Henry nodded slowly. That's good. Maybe now they can rest. Elsie studied his face. The lines etched deep from years of guilt and patience. You could have let it go, you know. You could have walked away. His hand brushed across the roses. I tried, but grief doesn't stay buried. It grows, climbs back to the surface until you face it. She crouched beside him. What about you? What will you do now? Henry looked toward the distant horizon, where the ocean met the gray sky. I'll do what I always do, tend to what's left. Silence settled between them, filled only by the sound of birds and the faint hum of reporters outside the gates. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like noise. It felt like closure. A few days later, the demolition was officially canceled. The town council released a statement calling the cemetery a historic site of remembrance. The same people who once ignored it now walked through its paths with flowers in their hands. Children laughed between the gravestones. Families prayed aloud. The forgotten dead had found voices again. Henry spent his days repairing headstones, cleaning paths, and trimming grass. But at night, when the world went quiet, he sat near Margaret's grave and talked to her, softly, as if she still listened. They found him guilty, love, he whispered one evening, lighting a candle beside her name. 20 years. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it's not. But the world knows now. The wind stirred the roses. They swayed gently, brushing his hand as if answering. He smiled faintly. You always said flowers remember kindness. I guess they remember pain, too. Behind him, Elsie approached again, notebook in hand, camera slung over her shoulder. You didn't show up at the hearing today, she said gently. He shook his head. I didn't need to. Watching him face the truth was enough. You could have testified, told him how you found everything. Henry looked at her, eyes steady. Some truths don't need my voice. They speak on their own. She hesitated. You're leaving town, aren't you? He looked at the gate, at the road, leading out toward the coast. There's another garden up north, a veteran's home. They need someone to tend the grounds. Might be quiet there. Elsie's voice softened. You've earned quiet. He chuckled under his breath. Peace isn't earned. It's planted. A few days later, Henry packed his things. One small suitcase, a folded photograph of Margaret, and a pouch of rose seeds. He locked the shed one final time and slipped the key into the soil beneath her headstone. For the next caretaker, he whispered. As he turned to leave, Elsie stood waiting by the gate. You didn't say goodbye. He smiled faintly. I'm not gone yet. She handed him a new copy of her article, The Gardener Who Made the Dead Speak. The headline made him laugh softly. You make me sound like a ghost. She grinned. Maybe you are, the kind that leaves peace behind. Henry placed a hand on her shoulder. Take care of them. The town will forget again someday. Remind them when it happens. I will, she promised. He walked toward the road, the morning light cutting through fog. The roses glow behind him, vivid against the dull stone, a small rebellion of color in a world too quick to forget. Hours later, the cemetery stood empty. The air smelled of salt and rain. One of the workers found a small silver watch buried near Margaret's grave, engraved with words faint but clear. Time heals nothing. Truth does. He handed it to Elsie, who smiled softly and placed it beside the flowers. He left you one last story, she whispered to the roses. That night, as the town slept, the rain began to fall again. The droplets struck the petals, washing the soil clean, carrying traces of dust and memory into the earth. Beneath it all, the buried evidence had long since decomposed, replaced by roots, life, and forgiveness. And though Henry's footsteps were miles away now, the garden he left behind kept blooming. Every season, the roses grew brighter, as if remembering the man who refused to let silence win. Visitors often said the flowers seemed to glow redder on cloudy days, when the air carried grief. No one could explain it, but the locals had a saying, "When the roses bloom, truth is awake." Elsie often returned on anniversaries, camera in hand, tracing the names carved into stone. Sometimes she swore she could hear a faint voice carried on the wind. You plant something beautiful, and the world eventually sees it. She'd smile through tears, whispering back, "They see it, Henry. They see it now." The cemetery became a garden of memory, and in its quiet heart, one grave always stood taller, roses blooming in perfect, endless rhythm. And though time kept moving, no one ever dared cut them again. Please like and subscribe to this channel.